Yes, I
There.
started recording.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, fantastic. We are recording this program, and it will post the PowerPoint and we'll post the audio on our website at www.edencounseling.com today or tomorrow. You'll also be receiving a survey that we would like you to complete to give us feedback, express whether this seemed to be of value, any suggestions you have for future trainings. My plan is to present 4 successive trainings at this same time frame in today, September, October, November, and maybe look at Thanksgiving there. But the goal is to go through my training in 4-session marriage counseling in 1-hour increments. For those of you that are new to me, I am the president of Eden Counseling and Consulting here in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm also the president of Eden Leaders Institute, which is a nonprofit that provides uh, coaching, consulting services, and training services to leaders and organizations. And our training is part of that organization. Just a little personal information, I've been married for 38 years to the same woman, which in our culture is considered an accomplishment. And I've been doing marital work since I first started training in 1977 in my master's program at Central Michigan University. My work really improved when I began developing content in 1989 that evolved into the Back to the Garden Marriage Conference series. And in just recent years, we've been developing marriage mentoring and marriage counselor training. And today, what you're going to hear are the beginnings of all of the core elements that are required to give couples the capacity, the skills, sometimes the thought processes and motivation to repair and create wonderful marriages. We've had the privilege here at Eden Counseling to train many counselors over the last 20 years. And so that's just part of the joy of what we do. What this is about is today is the first of 4 1-hour trainings. And you'll have, if you sat in on previous training with me, we did premarital training and we did disaster recovery training in 2 previous months. And all of these skills have been referenced, and we're going to go into them in more detail, explaining how they're used and when they're used. The content of today's training, marital counseling for happy couples, marriage counseling for good couples who want to grow and develop, and couples in distress and couples in disaster. I use the same skills with different sequencing for these various applications, and some of which I'll be able to differentiate over the next several weeks. It's a short period of time to spend an hour and each month and cover this, and so you may need to kind of review the material. You will need to practice these things, as I will explain at the end of today's session. You really can't guide someone authentically unless it's part of your own life. This is true of all the research in counseling. Successful counseling occurs in a professional standpoint when the counselor truly believes in what he or she is doing and communicates that authentically to the client. And so I'm teaching you things that I practice, Becky practices regularly. It's part of our life. That's a big part of what leads to helping guide couples to successful growth. It's about counseling that is done in 45 to 120-minute sessions. I do all of my counseling in 45-minute sessions. Most of you would find this rather challenging to do in that short time frame until you're very familiar with the content and very comfortable moving people through sort of directing the flow of conversation to get it in 45 minutes. Current research with marriage counseling argues that 90 minutes is the optimal time frame. 90 minutes just bores me, so I don't do it. But most counselors would want to engage a couple for 90 minutes at a time. And when you're beginning, probably 2 hours, just because you're not going to be real precise with the way you do things. What I'm teaching you works beautifully with highly motivated and competent couples. In fact, I call it marriage coaching when it's a couple that they have a good relationship. They just want to make things better. That is, that you can actually be done in 4 sessions. You can actually take people through in 4 sessions. They get it, they practice it if they are highly competent and motivated. I also do it in 4 sessions when I control the environment. And so we do marriage intensive interventions where people come to us for 3 to 5 days. And since I have control over how they spend their leisure time, how they eat, what they do, they also can do this in 4 sessions, even when they are a significantly distressed couple. They're a couple who is in real trouble. We can take them through this content if we don't leave them too much to their own bad habits that can really run counter to what we're trying to accomplish. Couples with disaster cannot be taken through this in 4 sessions. So if you are dealing with a couple with adultery, I tell people it's 12 months. I use the same content. I use the same skill set. But there's a lot more teaching about adultery, forgiveness, boundaries. There's just more content that has to be woven in. So it's a year process. But the same basic skill sets I use that I'm teaching you today. I lost my website. Where did it go? Lost my, here we go. So let's just talk just quickly. What works? What happens with a couple to where they become a better couple? You have success with your counseling. And so there are these studies that break down, it's called variance. So if I have a pie and I cut slices in that pie, put them all together, I have 100% of the pie. But I can take a slice out and look at it and name it. And so 10% of that pie, if I saw them today and 1 year from now we're done and they're doing better, 10% of that pie is the attitude they had when they came into the office. And I'm blessed with, God has given us a great team. Eden has a great relationship. Most people who come in, even if they're in great despair, expect to get something of value when they walk into my office, which is a terrific thing. When people come in and they don't expect value, I have to spend a little more time helping them develop hope. Hope is essential for any change. You can't expect to move in a direction to which you have no hope. Why would you waste the effort? Why would you go through the pain of change? So the attitude is very important. 15% of that pie is going to be, we call it rapport. It's the quality of relationship that you have with the person. And again, if they come in with positive expectation, they know something about you or they know you personally, that rapport may be very easy to establish. But sometimes, in fact, quite often in marital work, I have one individual that wants to be there and one individual who is just a visitor. My good friend Gary Sweden uses an acronym that comes from the old VCR. Do you remember a video cassette recorder? You know, you had this square thing, you would put it in a slot in a machine, it would play your video and you would rewind it. This is 80s technology when he crafted this stuff. So visitor, complainer, ready to change. VCR, visitor, complainer, ready to change. And a visitor, when you're doing marital counseling, if you can see my face, looks like this. Or looks like this. So you have one person that wants to be there and one person that doesn't. And so you have to win the visitor over. They have to feel welcome. They have to. So there's some time that it takes there if you have a visitor. It takes a little time to build rapport. We have a relationship where you can work collaboratively, work together on a project. 25% is the skill of the counselor. And so this kind of training will increase your probability of being successful with couples. As you develop your own skill, and as I said, it has to be authentic. You can't just talk about something you read. That doesn't work, or something somebody said. It has to be part of who you are, and then people will follow. 50% of the change is out of your hands, totally out of your control. It's in God's hands, it's in life circumstances, it's in the relationships that the couple already has. I say this to you because it's important to realize that you are not responsible for the well-being of another couple. That would be stepping into God's place. I say to all of my students, and I say to you, I have these phrases I say to myself whenever I meet somebody new. I didn't cause this mess. It's not my job to fix it. That's God's job. It's my job to be the very best counselor I can be for 45 or 90 or 120 minutes, whatever the length of time is. And if I do that, I am a success. I'm doing what God has called me to do. This is very important because marriage counseling can be very discouraging. Results are not guaranteed. So many variables take place. I wanted you to see that 50% of what takes place is outside of your hands, which is why I really try to promote small groups, connection with pastors, marriage mentoring programs in churches, so that we do influence that 50% even to some degree. So those are ongoing things we're trying to develop. But 50% is a lot, and your skill set is a lot of what brings this to the table. Confidence comes out of competence, and we hope to be helping you develop yourself as a competent guide to other couples. So even before we have session one, if it is someone coming out of our area into our area, I try to make contact and begin developing rapport right from the beginning. When it's not me, it's my front desk staff. If you were to call Eden Counseling, hopefully a smiling person would greet you and you would feel like we were a friendly and warm place. Those very first impressions are very important. When I receive a referral from a pastor in another part of our nation or outside of our nation, and they want me to get in touch with somebody, that first phone call is part of building rapport. So I make sure that my mindset is relaxed. I'm not stressed, so I don't communicate anxiety, and I make a relaxed phone contact. Even before they get here, if I can get them to do it, I'll have them fill out 2 personality scales that you see here. They're free, they're online, they're 20 minutes, easy to complete, and start sending me information. We have online forms that people fill out. I have them do that in advance. And I may send them the Amen Clinic scale, which is a little scale I'll show you later on. And there is a research scale called the Enriched Marriage Satisfaction Scale. Again, it's free. I just send it to them. They fill it out. And if it's premarital, we have them take the Prepare, which there is a fee for. It's like $35 or something in the U.S. And provides a lot of information. There's also an Enriched scale that has a fee. I tend not to use that because I have my own way of doing things, which I'm going to teach you today, to get to know them and to assess their marriage state. So this gets people engaged right from the beginning. It piques their curiosity. What are we going to learn? What's going to happen here? And it shows me whether they're invested in the process. Do they do what I asked them to do? Or do they delay? Do they postpone? Do they procrastinate? So all this is important information as you're working with couples. This is the content of the first session. We build rapport. We want to hear some complaint. We want people to move from a visitor to a complainant, and even move them in the first session into ready to change. We'll talk about that. I let them know what to expect from the process, what the boundaries are, when they can talk to me, when they can't talk to me, how long we will meet, how often we will meet. Research also shows that anxiety goes down if things are clear. So I've learned to be very specific with, this is what you can expect from me, this is how we'll do it, and that helps a lot. We're going to do a marriage assessment, and we're going to do conflict management and romance builders. Those are specific activities that I'm going to show you as we move through today. So in building rapport and establishing relationship, I also take a few moments to just introduce myself, even if they've heard of me. I may ask them, what did you hear? How did you hear about us? What brings you to us? And then I will just take a few minutes and introduce myself, which allows them to kind of deal with their anxieties of what is he going to expect of me, and they can kind of just hopefully just relax a little bit. And I tell them who I am, how long I've been doing what I'm doing. I'll tell people I've been a father, I've been a mentor, just so they get a feel. I'm not trying to boast. I'm just trying to let them see that I am confident in who I am and what I do. I just I don't say that outright, but by telling them where I've been and what I do, hopefully I'm creating a stage where they believe they can get some help here. I always ask early on in the interview, have you ever done this before, seen a counselor? And their previous experience will affect their expectations for the present. I would rather have somebody not seen a counselor before and had a bad experience, but if they have seen a counselor and had a good experience, that increases their positive expectation. If they had a bad experience, that's something you have to overcome as you build rapport. You'll see that for me to do 45-minute sessions, I have to really put boundaries around the amount of discussion that takes place. And so I prepare them with comments like, can you tell me very briefly what caused you to come in now? I assume things have been going on for a while, but what brings you in now? And with your permission, I may interrupt and ask clarifying questions so we can make the most of our time. So I try to gently, clearly, and firmly let them know that I will craft the discussion so that it has a good flow, that it accomplishes its purposes. And people always get it. If I prepare them in advance, they let me interrupt. I will say, excuse me, could I ask a few clarifying questions? Or I will say, could we focus a little more on this? We'll get back to that. So I sort of gently ask permission to guide the process, and once they've given permission, it goes really quite well most of the time. If there is a visitor, I want that person to express how they feel about being there. Whose idea was it to come? So what were you hoping to accomplish? I turn to the other person. How do you feel about that? And if they're honest, they'll say, well, I think it's a waste of time. Or I really didn't want to come. I'm really uncomfortable talking about myself. And I simply validate their experience. We'll be talking about validation. I acknowledge that that's a normal kind of experience. I simply say, I hope you do find value in this. You know, I just try to acknowledge, validate, but I don't let that slow me down. I just kind of keep going with it so that they can feel heard. They can also see it doesn't throw me off. I'm used to this. I'll say, jokingly, you know, there are sometimes tread marks out in the parking lot where someone has dragged their spouse in and they've been digging their heels in, and they just leave streaks up all up the stairwell. Just sometimes a little humor. If the humor doesn't fly, back away from it, but sometimes that helps things move comfortably. I give them expectations. If we were doing 4 sessions, I say we're going to do 4 sessions. They're going to be 90 minutes each, or whatever length we've decided. You're going to learn specific skills in this process, and I sequence them a particular way because I find that this works. So you can expect we'll start and end on time, if at all possible, and there will be homework with each session. There will be things for you to do, and here's my boundary. You can email me anytime you want, or you can call my desk phone. You probably won't reach me directly, but if you want to leave me a voicemail, I'll be happy to respond. I have a company email. So this has to do with my own boundaries. I have a company email, and I give that out freely to people. And so I expect a lot of traffic on that company email. I also tell them, you know, if you lose all this, you can go to our website and you can hit contact us, and in that email slot, identify me, it'll come my way. So I let them know when I'm available, when I'm not. I may not get back to you the same day. If it's a real crisis, you know, I'll do everything I can. If it's a life-threatening emergency, go to the hospital. So we lay out these kind of boundaries and expectations for contact with me. I tell them that these are the goals and the sequence within which we will pursue these goals. So I explain that the very first thing we have to do is assess for conflict, which we'll do in a moment. We will work on increasing positive interaction. We'll work on improving communication. We'll work on problem solving. And then we'll get to dismantling what I call landmines. And landmines are those things that blow up when you approach them. And I will say to a couple, you know, I used to kind of let people just kind of throw things out and we'd try to deal with it. And I found that damage was being done because people didn't have the skills or the understanding to deal with the really hard issues. So you may feel a little frustration with me as I kind of take my time getting into some of the deeper issues, but I want to make sure that we can manage them. And people get it. I may not be modeling exactly how the conversation will go. It'll vary from person to person, but most people will get it and actually appreciate it if they've been through marriage counseling where they would leave a session really upset and just it would ruin their week together, which can happen if you allow too much negativity in a session. So here's the marriage assessment. Early on in the first session, I use a whiteboard, and I have terrible handwriting, so I apologize for that. And I say, even if you can't read it, I can. And on a 1 to 5 point scale, I have them respond to each of these categories. And so I say, husband and wife, you know, say Mary and Bob. Mary, in communication, a 5 would be we communicate often. We think we communicate well. We seek to understand each other. We seek to treat each other respectfully. That would be a 5. A 1 would be we don't communicate much at all, or it's constant misunderstanding or constant conflict. So 1 means it's destructive to our relationship. 5 means it's really helpful. And then the numbers in between are some kind of gradation on those themes. Mary, what do you think? She says a 3. Bob, what do you think? He says a 2. And I'm writing these things down on a whiteboard. I write down the category and I write down the score so we can all see it. Conflict management. A 5 is that we have too much conflict. It's just destructive. Excuse me, a 5 is good. A 5 is we have conflict because we are open and honest, but we treat each other with respect, and we seek solution over fighting. So we really don't fight much. If we fall into a fight, we know how to manage that. We move towards solution. Conflict enhances our relationship. A 1 is we either don't have conflict, which means we have a shallow relationship. It's brittle. It'll break with conflict, or it's destructive. And I have them rate, you know, 3, 5, 2, so on. It is very common when people are seeking counseling to rate themselves, at least one of the parties, low on communication, and another party, or both, high on conflict. Those are things that have to be addressed right away. Then we proceed through finances, friends and family, sexual relationship in similar fashion. I say what a 5 is and what a 1 is, and I have them choose in between. So a 5 in finances is we have enough, we agree as to how to distribute funds, and if we have any extra, we agree on how to deal with that. A 1 is we don't have enough, so poverty is an automatic 1, or there is great conflict about how to distribute. Friends and family, 5 is we do have friends and family that love us, love our marriage, provide support to us. It enhances our marriage. 1 is we are either isolated, we don't have these resources, or those resources create conflict. Sexual relationship. 5 is, well, not everybody gets everything they want, but it really is good for us. We've worked out a rhythm and a pattern that is mutually satisfying. We look forward to it. It enhances our relationship. It's part of our fun factor of marriage. A 1 is we either don't do it, and couples that have sexual encounters once a month or less have an asexual relationship. The sexuality is not contributing anything to the relationship. It's having no impact. So there has to be at least 1 or more. So I say you're either not having any or there's tremendous problems around it, and we move through that. Other categories are parenting. A 5 is we're in agreement. We think we're parenting well. We're pretty happy with what we're producing. A 1 is constant conflict, or we're really unhappy with how our children are. Faith. I'm often working with Christian couples. They often score high on faith because they have a shared, but I define faith as you have principles that you agree upon that guide your life. Your relationship with God is an important part of your identity as an individual and as a couple, and it enhances your relationship. A 1 is we don't have faith, or we are in conflict over our faith, and they give a 1 through 5 rating, as all the others and the ones that will follow. Leisure time this is getting into the phileo part of love. We're friends. We enjoy each other's time. They're things we look forward to. A 5 is we probably have regular dates where it's just us, plus activities with other people, plus family activities. A 1 is we don't have time for fun, friendship, or we have grown so distant that it doesn't exist. Perception of each other's personalities is a little more complex. So a 5 is, yep, I know you, you have quirks, you have strengths, and I can appreciate all of them and love you for it. A 1 is like the presence of a serious addiction. You know, you really are engaging in something that is destructive. And so that's a little more complex, as is marriage expectations. I define a 5 as, okay, you've been married 10 years. A 5 would be, I get it. I'm where I'm at. I kind of know what's coming. I watch Dr. Phil. I read books. I watch Oprah. These are American cultural events for those of you that are not in America right now. Television programming. So I'm not surprised by what's happening. That's a 5. A 1 is, I'm lost. I have no idea how we got where we're at. I don't know what's coming. And so we rate them on that. Now what we do with this, then, I've got these categories on a whiteboard, a column, and then scores. And I first look and see where they are more than 1 point apart. I tell them, if they're only 1 point apart, I call them the same. So 3 and a 2. But if there's a 1 and a 5, that warrants discussion. So I'll circle that. So we have differences of opinion on these points. And so once I conclude this, I'll spend a few times saying, what did you mean by a 1? What did you mean by a 5? To try to get them to understand each other. And then, if it's a 4 or a 5, I put an S by it for strength. If it's a 1 or a 2, I put a G by it for growth required. And we just look at the board and we can see their strengths and we celebrate them. See, that's awesome. You know, you have 4 strengths. That's fantastic. And if they have none, I say jokingly, this is fantastic. I can't lose. Look at this. You have growth required in every area. You know, I can't make things worse. This is awesome. And so they get the joke. It adds a little levity. And it also communicates, I'm not put off by this. I'm not afraid of working with you just because you see your life as a mess. Because I have great hope in what God can do with people. I know that's been very, very clear to me. So we do the anger expression scale. It's very clear the elements that we have to work on to improve this relationship. And I always communicate, and I know what to do to make this better. And after you've been through this training, you'll be able to say the same thing. If we do this and this, it'll get better. Almost always conflict has to be managed. Once in a while I get a couple where they are managing conflict really well and they have a very specific thing they need to work on, and I will actually skip this, but in time it almost always comes back. So if I don't do this in the first session, it almost always creeps back in later. So the anger expression scale, I use numbers. I created this to show murder and suicide all the way to, I'll show you one here, mild irritation, not even expressed. So from a really extreme expression to nothing. And so a 10 is death, 9 is wounding, so there's actually bruises or cuts or scrapes, broken bones, or what I call major property damage, which is like holes in walls, doors ripped off hinges, broken windows, smashed appliances. 8 is physical contact without wounding, grabbing, holding, shoving, or significant threat. If a large man blocks a woman from leaving the room, it's still an 8. Minor property damage would be if I'm holding a pencil and I just throw it to the floor. It doesn't really even cause any damage, but it increases the fear factor. So 8, 9, and 10 are about intimidation through physical means, creating fear or wounding or death, controlling through violence. 7 can be as quiet as an eye roll. There are obscene gestures that are 7s, name calling, cursing. A lot of landmines are 7s. Oh, you're just like your father. Oh, you're just like so and so. So it's a put down. That's expression of contempt, and rhetorical questions often imply this. Why'd you do that? What made you think that would be a reasonable thing to do? So sarcasm, rhetorical questions are unacceptable. Yelling is unacceptable. That's a 6. Just too loud, too intense. A 5 is acceptable. If you saw 2 people at a 5, they're expressing emotion, but it looks manageable. But that's the place where one of them, if they're paying attention, knows they're ready to go to a 6. 5 is where you take a timeout. 4 is where you take a timeout. 4 is emotions are expressed, but nobody feels any fear, nobody feels any contempt. Feels pretty much in control. 3, usually it's after the fact, very calmly. Last night when you hung up on me, I was upset. I thought I had something important to say, and I felt it was disrespectful. So it's very descriptive, not judgmental, and we'll get into that next month, dealing with judgment. 2, it's just a minor need for control, but it doesn't threaten you, and 1 is no expression. So the place that I focus is in 4 and 5. At 4 and 5, you can choose to take a timeout if need be. You can choose to alter the course of your discussion. Once you're into 6, 7, and 8, it gets out of control. And this is true for everybody. I point out, so after we go through this, I say to them, what is the highest point that your relationship has ever reached? And if someone says 6, I know they're not getting 7, because everybody has at least 7. Everybody expresses contempt. In my household, I'll be honest with you, and I say this to the couple to get them to understand this. Contempt is very, very common. We have to continue to work not to express it. But my wife and I are very expressive, and this is true. We are openly very expressive. Therefore, sometimes we're a little impulsive in speech or in gesture, and probably contempt is experienced every day by one of us. It's not a big deal for us, and I'll explain why in a few minutes, how you counter this sort of thing with a lot of good, positive stuff. But landmines, and one author uses the term zingers, are 7s that just really break hearts. And you can't do things that create great woundedness. So minor contempt, if you have a reasonably tough hide, it doesn't really bother you that much. I'm able to give account. Becky's had a rough day. She's expressed some contempt. I'm not going to take it personal. But a zinger goes right to the heart and causes great damage. So these distinctions I make with people as we continue to work through the anger stuff. So these are the things I have. How intense has it been? How often has that happened? And then we go on down through, and we discuss, as I've just mentioned, we don't want anything above a 5. I then do a little teaching about brain function to help them realize this is a neurobiological thing, that God made us a certain way. Emotions have a particular function. And the problem with sin is that we allow those emotions to drive us into expressions that are unacceptable to God. So the prefrontal lobe, right here, right behind the eyes, is a well-developed part of anatomy. The humans have a much better prefrontal lobe developed than any other of God's creatures, and it needs to be active on and working for self-control, problem-solving, and creative thinking. So when emotions get high enough, any emotion, joy, happiness, sorrow, or fatigue, or different things, it shuts off and the emotional system takes over. We now are not functioning with the rationale basis of our humanity. We're reacting out of an emotional state. And if it's a negative, conflicted emotion, then we're looking at the fight or flight kind of syndrome. And so this is really negative. This is a scale, my anger scale on the left and time on the right. And the stereotype is the husband perceives himself as criticized, reacts very strongly, the wife joins him, and they just haggle. There's contempt, there's yelling, and then they take a break, but it's not planned. It's out of woundedness, it's out of fatigue, it's out of disgust, and each of them thinks negative thoughts about the other. They're ruminating on what happened. They're thinking about the bad things that were said, maybe how they could get even. And so the next time they come together, they're right at that same place. And this predicts divorce in American culture. It predicts domestic violence in many cultures. Um, uh, People have to learn to reduce the negativity between them to be able to coexist in peace. This is everybody's ideal. The attempt of this graph is to show a slope at both sides, a gentle startup, not a rapid escalation. But, you know, honey, there's some important things for us to talk about. Do you feel like you're up to it? I'm giving her a little warning there's something coming. We're easing into this. A praised sandwich works. You know, my wife cooks a meal I didn't like, or I cook a meal she doesn't like, and one of us says, you know, I really love it when you cook. Let's not have this one again tomorrow. But I'm looking forward to the next meal. I think that'll be awesome. So we move into it gently. So we have a gentle startup. We keep it at a 4 or 5. We work it to conclusion. That's this point on the grid, and then there's a critical point. We kiss and make up, and that's really, really important. So there's a gentle startup. We don't get above a 4 or a 5. We reach a point of conclusion, and we kiss and make up. So, you know, I'll be honest with you. Some of that happens at our house, not all the time, a good bit of the time. But this next piece is perfectly acceptable as well. I apologize for that bit of, come on back. I apologize for that bit of nonsense. Let me find my current slide again. Okay, we're going to do a quick run through to find where we were. Yeah, since I'm the guy doing the technical stuff, we're likely to have mistakes like this, which gives you an opportunity to extend grace, which is good for your soul. Here we go. So this happens all the time, where we do have a gentle startup, but it gets up to a 6 or a 7, and someone calls timeout, the old T in American sports. We go to neutral spaces for however long it takes. If I'm really worked up, I live on a 1.3-mile little lake. I'll take a 12-minute run. I'm good. I'm perfectly calm. So everybody needs a short way that they calm themselves, a couple of deep breaths, prayer, recited scripture, a longer one, a brisk walk, turn on some music, and then we all need at times a huge break. We need a few hours of just chills. You know, we need a day off. So managing regulation has to do with the capacity to step mentally, emotionally, and spiritually away from the conflict for a while and let things calm down. So we teach this to people. We talk about landmines. And here again, I reiterate, so landmines, you put a flag on them and you don't go near them until you're ready to dismantle them. And I'll just be blunt with them. It's kind of joking. I'll say, I don't know that you all have the skill to talk about landmines yet, so we're not going to do it. I get tired of scraping body parts off the wall and cleaning blood off the floor when these discussions happen in my office. So I'm going to be sort of limiting things with your permission until I know we can really talk about them. That may sort of frustrate you, but believe me, it'll work much better. And everybody accepts it. I never have any resistance with this. They know what I'm talking about. They know the things that are explosive. We may have already touched on them in the anger expression scale and or the marriage assessment. So I let them know that we're going to take our time getting into these things. So I've already kind of taken you pretty quickly through the 3 big chunks of the first session. Rapport, stands alone, build rapport, do the marriage assessment, move into conflict management, and now we're going to teach the romance builders section. And that comprises the bulk of the first meeting. And the reason for this is we don't want people to have relationships with problems. We don't just talk about problems. We need, and here's where I start throwing out little ratios, little research tidbits for people to think about. I used to teach people that we needed 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. So if there was a negative interaction that wasn't a landmine, 5 positive interactions would take care of it. The research has changed just recently. The way they do this is they follow couples around. They put cameras and, you know, radio devices. They record conversations. They record circumstances and rate them. Now they're saying it's 20-to-1, 20 times more positive interaction than negative with couples who are happy with their relationship. Now this includes a lot of little neutral things. Please pass the salt. That applies. If it's neutral or positive, 20 times more interactions than negative. You can't have zingers. You can't be blowing up landmines. This is essential for happiness. So I just teach them this. I talk about it. So what we're going to do to boost the positive is I'm going to give you an exercise to take home. I want you to first this week just fill out the exercise. Next week we'll review it, And the goal will be that every day you'll be doing things for each other that are loving. You'll be intentionally being positive and loving and in a romantic way. So we're going to boost that right from the beginning. Some couples in distress will have trouble with this. They feel too vulnerable. They're afraid that they'll be manipulated or used. So I always give permission. You can at least go home and do the exercise, and we'll talk about it next week. You don't have to share it. You don't have to do anything with it, but I want you to fill it out. Now, this particular exercise is prognostically very important. When couples won't do this, you're not going to be doing 4-session marriage counseling. You have a significant problem. There is a essential lack of safety that exists in this couple, or they're so disorganized they can't follow through with things you teach them. And so there maybe needs some, in America we assess for attention deficit disorder, we assess for emotional disability, we assess for problems that make it impossible for people to be successful. So we try to tease that out. And if there's lack of safety, that's more discussion. So how did you feel when I talked? So next session might be, how did you feel when I asked you to write this out? And people say, I felt afraid. I felt that I'd be totally rejected and disappointed and put down if I told my spouse what I wanted from them. So this is all something that you'll process. Most couples do this perfectly easily, but I wanted to give you a little sense that it could start stirring the kind of thing that is going to require a little more work than you expected. Most couples will get it. You take a piece of paper, you write, I feel loved and cared about when you ... and you write down 12 positive, romantic type things that cause you to feel loved. It's a simple exercise. I want you to think about you. It's not really selfish, but you're thinking about what you want and you're communicating to your spouse what you want. Too often we try to do mind reading. Too often people do for the other what they want. And then I ask if they're familiar with American Christian marriage literature, I'll ask them, have you come across the love languages stuff? Have you ever run across that stuff? And these days, most people at least heard about it. And I'll say, everybody seems to have a certain way of receiving love that really speaks to their heart. So you're either a words person, you're a gifts person, you're a touch, not necessarily sex, but you're a touch person, you're a meaningful time person, so you have to be with that person, or you're a deeds of service person. You feel loved when somebody does something for you. So these are the 5 languages. I don't spend a lot of time with this. I just sort of introduce it. A lot of couples have had some familiarity with it. They might even pipe up, I think I'm a words person. I say, well, we'll see. We'll look at this exercise, and I'll be looking to see what's in it when you come next week, and we'll talk about it. And so I make sure they understand they're positive, they're not negative, and I always use this example. So this doesn't fit on here. I feel loved when you stop nagging me. That's a stopping thing. That's not a doing thing. They also can't be overarching, overwhelmingly huge. I feel loved and cared about when you keep the house clean 100% of the time. And that doesn't fit here. There are specific actions and events, a hug, a kiss, hold my hand, bring me home a treat from the grocery store, prepare a meal, normal kinds of things, plan a date, watch the kids for me. So I throw out some examples, and once I'm sure they've got it, I simply say, I want you to bring that back next time, and we'll look at it. If you feel comfortable sharing it in between, that's not a problem at all, but if it creates any negativity, it's going in the wrong direction. This is all about positive interaction. They get it, and we move on. So, and by the way, if at any point you have questions, please feel free to throw them out. I'm not seeing anything in the chat section, so I'm just rolling along. And Mirabella, you feel free to interrupt me if there's something I should be paying attention to as we go through this, because we're moving into the last about 19 minutes, and I want to be sure there's time for interaction should you all like that. So we do this, and this thing's not moving. So let me leave this slide up for a minute. So what happens next time, I'll let you know this so that you at home can practice this, which is where I'm going to end up with your homework. So they bring this in the next week. He has at least 12. She has at least 12. And I have them one at a time go back and forth and just read it to me. So they are practicing expressing verbally what they want. The spouse is practicing hearing it, and I'm guiding the discussion. And in the beginning, anytime there's interaction, I'm structuring it and I'm guiding it. I don't just let things happen. I don't know these people. I don't know if they have the capacity to converse well, and I don't like a mess. So So I pretty much tell them what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. Sometimes I tell them how long we're going to do it if I find that they're pretty long-winded. And I stay in control of the discussion. This provides tremendous sense of safety. And my confidence, and your confidence as you develop this, communicates this. This is a safe place. I will not let things get out of hand here. Nobody gets hurt here. I don't have to say that. They get that. But if in the anger expression scale there's an 8 and a 9, I do say that. I say, you know, in this place, this will never happen. Because it never has. I've never had anybody get violent in my office, ever, in all the years I've done this. So back to romance builders. Give me a kiss. I'm sort of judging and editing. Oh, that's great. That's very clear. Tell me you love me. So then I'm seeking clarification. So are you saying, she says the words "I love you," or are you thinking there's some other ways she tells you that you love me? And I'm looking for whether they're able to be specific or whether they tend to be kind of vague. So a vague person will say, oh, it could be lots of ways they tell me that you love me. And I'll say, okay, well, let's get specific. It'll give you a nice long list. 12 is a minimum. If you give her 30 to choose from, that's awesome. So give me what you're thinking of. Oh, well, you could compliment me. Okay, that's another one. You could, you're getting the idea, I hope. My brain's a little bit fuzzy right now. But if it's a general one, I get them to give me several specifics so it's crystal clear and they get used to being specific in their requests. And some people just aren't very specific. They tend to be more diffuse, more kind of global. But I push people in specific, and then I'm rating them to see if they're positive. And every now and then I'll get someone will just say, like, be nice to me. Well, what do you mean by be nice to me? Well, I mean don't be mean to me. Okay, well, we have to make it positive. So this is good. I think nice is good. So let's talk about what nice looks like. And they'll come up with 4 or 5 items that define nice. But the typical ones are what you'd expect. Hugs, kisses, gifts, doing chores for me, helping me out if I ask for help, watching the kids, planning an event. So this usually goes pretty smoothly. And then the homework for them is do 2 a day for the rest of your life. And that's how my homework always is, rest of your life. We're not going to build a structure that is temporary. This is a lifelong kind of pattern. So everything that I teach, you do this for the rest of your life. Many people actually, and this helps them kind of reveal the fact that they kind of maybe thought they just have to come a few times and life would suddenly be different. It wouldn't take any effort. As I introduce romance builders, I say we are going to learn to be intentionally romantic, which is necessary in mature relationships. And I may talk a bit about romance. I may say, you know, romance, how long do you think romance lasts? And people will give some number, and I'll say research shows that it lasts about 18 months. And what happens is, in the beginning, people are so focused on each other that all they can think about is how to please the other person. So it's this easy situation where I'm giving to you, you're giving to me, we're trying to outdo the other, being nice, it's awesome. But then life gets busy, and now I have to pay attention to work or children or getting ready for a marriage or moving. And now I don't have time to focus on you all the time, and you feel it. You feel that loss. And that's where people start wondering, you know, is this a good relationship? What's happening? And so I try to create a normative expectation that you have to work at a relationship. And if they don't seem to get it, I may shift into other areas. Well, I mean, let's say you wanted to be a world-class athlete. What would you have to do? I mean, not just an average athlete. You want to be world-class. Oh, you'd have to work. You'd have to get a trainer. You'd have to do, I say, yeah, well, the same thing applies to marriage. If you want a world-class marriage, not just an average marriage, you need a trainer, you need discipline, you need exercises, you have to practice. And people, and I'll find a metaphor they can connect with so that they get it. This is valuable work, but it takes work. And we try to knock the myth away of the easy romance. If it was meant to be, it should just happen, it should be natural. You know, that's just not the way it is. And I believe God intends it that way. I believe, you know, for example, when you come to the Lord, you often experience this. People experience amazing transformational things, but in time they have to develop the disciplines that come with being a mature Christian. And I think that's just part of growing up. God doesn't want you to remain immature in your faith, in your body, in your mind, in your marriage, in your capacity to parent, in your career development, and in your ministry. So these are kind of little speeches I'll throw in, if needed, to help people, you know, kind of get it, kind of move along. So this is actually your homework. The homework that they get is the same thing too. I want them to go home and practice taking timeouts for anger over 5. I want them to use the numbers. I'll say, you know, there's a certain script. There's certain lines that develop in conflict, And if I say them to my wife, she knows we're in conflict. So if you use my numbers, totally different. We're stepping into a totally new language. And so if I say, honey, this is a 6, I need a timeout, it will also link to what we're doing here. So your spouse will know that you're paying attention in counseling, you're trying to do your best. And I give this little speech so that I don't have people criticize each other for being unauthentic, well, you're only doing this because the counselor told you to. So I try to circumvent that with announcing that it's such a good thing when you do what the counselor says, and that you should be thankful and encourage each other to do that. So part of what I've evolved over the years is to try to short circuit negative stuff that tends to happen normally. And so the sequence that I've shown you today, these little bits of conversation I'm sharing with you, have all evolved out of my observing, okay, that's not working so well. What can I do to improve it, and refining it, which is what you have to do with any new skill set, is practice and be willing to reevaluate and change things a bit. So they have the Romance Builders exercise. I expect them next time to bring in a piece of paper with these things written out. As I said earlier, if they don't, that's not good news. It means we got some serious work here. I want them to avoid landmines. I said, I may have them make a list. I may have done that during conflict. I may say, I don't want to talk about landmines, but just let me know what they are. Children, finances, going to church, could be anything. And then I say, I want you to try, see what you can do to not talk about that this week. See if you can just set that aside. And then the last thing, which I haven't shown you yet, is I describe to them very simple prayer. And I link this, I think it's Matthew 5, where Christ says, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who despitefully use you. And I'll say, you guys aren't enemies, you're friends. But I bet there are times when it feels like you're living with an enemy. And so I think we're just really good to take this prayer and use it. So the 2-word prayer, my wife's name is Becky. Every day I pray, bless Becky. Every day I hope she's praying, bless Paul. So we are being obedient to blessing and praying for. Simple directive. I have a handout on counsel tools if you want to read about this from a biblical and descriptive rationale. The 6-word prayer is show me how to bless Becky. Show me how to bless Becky. And these are remarkable prayers from both a Christian, however you view how the Spirit of God works in you, and from a psychological standpoint, really, really powerful. Here's a true story about this. I do consultation in the Northeast. I live in Virginia, which is more southern Atlantic coast. I go up to New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, and I have a friend up there that wanted me to do breakfast with a gentleman I'd already become acquainted with. In fact, he had already brought his daughter down for an intensive several years before. So I knew him quite well. We did breakfast, and he poured out a story that was really tragic about life and relationship and how difficult his marriage was and how he tried and tried and tried. He had just given up. And you could say he had good reason to do this. So I said, well, would you be willing to bring her down to an intensive? No, I've given up. Would you be willing to do some counseling? No, I've given up. Would you be willing to pray? And I knew he is strong enough. He's strong, regardless of his feeling of his marriage, strong in the faith, obedient servant of Christ. He said, well, yeah, I would pray. I gave him this little introduction I gave you, and I said, every day you pray, call her Mary. Bless Mary. Show me how to bless Mary. I'll do it. I happened to be up in the same church, I think it was 3 months later, and looked him up and said, hey, what's happening? He says, oh, this is troublesome. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I pray in this every day, and she's treating me better than she has for years. I don't know what to do with it. I said, well, he says, I don't trust it. I said, that's fine, but continue to pray. Okay, I will. Some a few months later. How's it going? It's getting worse. I'm starting to like her. And this actually makes me anxious because I've put up kind of barriers and I'm protecting myself. I said, okay, keep praying. So no other intervention than the fact that he was praying. To his knowledge, things began changing. So I say, I want you to pray this every day. And I asked them, were they praying the prayer? And again, it's kind of diagnostic. If they don't do it, what does that mean? Is it forgetful? Is it not motivated? Is it not paying attention? Is it lack of intimacy with God? So that is the homework. Now, I would like you to do this homework as well. When we get together in September, I would like you to have, with your spouse, you may be with your spouse or not, but if you don't practice these things, you will not understand them. I've done a pretty quick, rapid overview of these things. Hopefully, what I said kind of made sense, but you won't remember any of this. It's too much content. But if you share with your spouse, I should have added actually do the marriage assessment scale. These points will be online. Sit down with your spouse, go over marriage assessment, go over the anger expression scale, talk about taking timeouts, do the romance builders, avoid landmines in your own home, and pray the 2 and 6 word prayer daily. So that is your homework if you choose to accept that. And Becky and I started out in 1989. We attended a workshop that we found really transformational. We adapted that content into our own work, and we've been doing this for years and years. I would never ask you to do something that I haven't done myself or do on a regular basis. Wouldn't ask it of you. I wouldn't ask you to do anything that I didn't think had high value, high transformational value. So we are nearing the last 6 minutes of our time together. I have covered the essential content. Is there anything? I see a comment, a thank you. You're certainly welcome. Anyone else have a comment or a question? And at this point, Mirabella, if someone wants to be unmiked, that would be helpful, or they can text or write something. Are there any questions or comments? Or examples or for instances? Or anything you would like me to repeat because I went too quickly and you could use a little clarification. There being silence, I'll assume we're doing all right, which is fine. That's absolutely great. We are going to do this. It's the 3rd Thursday of the month, noon to 1 Eastern time. It'll be Eastern Daylight Time, I think, through November. There's a place where Europe and us get off an hour, but we're not there. I appreciate the privilege of doing this. I'm sharing with you things that I've trained many counselors in. It definitely helps their work. I believe it'll help yours. You'll get a survey today. I'm really interested in your assessment of what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, and I'll be looking forward to hearing as you apply these principles the impact it has in your life, because that will shape your capacity to lead others. Those of you in leadership, be thinking about marriage mentoring, be thinking about, do we have at least one annual marriage emphasis, something in our church? The 3 things, those of you that are pastoral leaders, that will boost the health of the families in your church are a marriage emphasis, a parenting emphasis, and a finance emphasis. Now, you're already, I hope, emphasizing discipleship and spiritual disciplines and how to walk with the Lord. But if you'll weave these in, either with preaching activity or special events, you'll be enhancing things. And if we can help with that in any way, let us know. So again, what I'm going to do now is just jump back to the website.
There are
yes.
12 questions that were typed
Oh, good.
in. One of them, Philip Herring, asks, is all of this covered in the 6 sessions of premarital counseling we send people for? I assume at Eden.
Yeah. When people come to Eden, they do multiple sessions of premarital counseling. We start with the Prepare Enrich. We let it shape the first discussions. What are the strength areas and growth areas? We always do communication. We always do conflict management. We always do budget. And then other topics will evolve from that. So I would say yes, that the essentials that are taught here are taught in premarital counseling. The sequencing might not always be the same because it will be driven by their responses on the Prepare Enrich. I hope that's helpful. Is there another question?
Yes, the second question was, could you please tell us how to resolve landmines?
Oh, that's in session 4. I absolutely will. Yes, we will. We will progress in 4 sessions with the couple and with you. We will be addressing landmines. Yes, but I don't have time to do that today. That's a whole session. Other questions? Any more, Mirabella?
No, that's all of the questions that were. Several thank yous and that's
I'm I'm seeing. Okay, I saw the. Thank you for pointing out the questions. I have to move the panel off so I can see my screen. Um, and some of you are promising to do the homework. That's awesome. Uh, I'll look forward to hearing how that goes. Um, uh, you really, I just experienced myself. God has to do transformational work in me for me to be able to authentically believe that God does transformational work. Therefore, I have to have some bad stories. The transformational stories that I share from my own life are my worst stories, not my best. The accomplishments I have accomplished, things that the world views as valuable have very little meaning in transformation. And when I share with people how God has helped me through, whether it's physical, marital, emotional, then we have transformational stories. So don't be ashamed of. One comment I did make in the beginning is that marital counseling is very different than individual. It's more structured, it's more directed, and there's more transparency. When I'm doing individual work, I'm far less transparent. I don't tell a lot of stories about me in individual work, but well, unless it's a teenager. But with teenagers, with families, and with couples, it seems to really help them get it if I tell genuine stories, and therefore the stories can't be all about success. I have to throw in some stories about struggles and failures so that they can see a storyline they can follow. Oh, here's someone that had to grow up. Oh, here's someone that had to learn a few things. Oh, here's someone that had to really practice things because he is inherently a perfectionist, judgmental person, and God has had to help craft him into a less judgmental person for him to do his job. That's me. So these stories are really, really, really good. So we are going to close with prayer. I'm going to close with prayer, then we're going to sign off. Heavenly Father, I'm grateful for this time, these people, the lives affected by them. I pray you bless their home, their marriage, their ministry, and keep us safe and healthy so we can continue this discussion. God bless you all. We'll be talking soon. I'm going to close out the meeting now. Bye-bye.